Hey everyone, so One Piece chapter 1111 just came out, and this was a phenomenal display of the Gorosei's abilities. Specifically, the Gorosei that I think is probably the strongest among the group, which is Warcury. I go into reasons for that in one of my most recent videos, talking about the potential matchups for the Gorosei down the line, and in there I break down that the Gorosei's rankings that I believe make the most sense to me are in order of planets. So Warcury, then Venus, then Mars, then Jupiter, and then finally Saturn. So Saturn, who we were dealing with for the majority of this arc, is probably the weakest of the Gorosei. And Warcury, who just had one of the most, if not the most impressive display of simple, straightforward Conqueror's Haki, not including, using it for attacks or advanced Conqueror's Haki, but just purely unleashing Conqueror's Haki, probably the single most impressive display in the entire series. It's either this, or it's Shanks using his Haki against Green Bull. I view these as two very different instances, as the Shanks instance was Shanks doing a very targeted attack from a very, very, very far distance away, so maybe the most long-range use of Conqueror's Haki ever. And it wasn't really an attack, but a very targeted display of Conqueror's Haki where it seemed very directed specifically at Green Bull. It's not like his Conqueror's Haki was blowing away all the random citizens of Wano who happened to be around, or, the scabbards and everything like that who were there or anything like that. So Shanks was apples and oranges. What Shanks did was very long distance, very targeted at Green Bull, which is crazy impressive as is. What Warcury did here is the more traditional displays of Conqueror's Haki that we've seen, like Big Mom on during the tea party when she gets mad that Mother Caramel's photo breaks, or Kaido when he's getting enraged and powering up against Luffy in chapter 1041. The general displays of Conqueror's Haki where characters are just angry, exuding force with their Haki and just unleashing it in the general area, so sort of large area of effect release of Conqueror's Haki. Warcury's is by far pretty indisputably the largest and most forceful that we've ever seen. And that's in comparison to even the likes of Kaido and Big Mom. Now, I'm not saying that means that Warcury is stronger than Yonko or anything like that. I'm just saying that objectively, at least in this one category of just sheer Conqueror's Haki release, that was probably the most significant that we've had in the entirety of One Piece. So Oda is really building up these Gorosei right here. Not to mention, towards the beginning of this chapter, we had Mars showing up in front of Jinbei, or nearby Jinbei, and Jinbei was taken aback and shocked and kind of intimidated by just how unreal Mars's Haki was, which is not something that you ever see from Jinbei. Again, this is a character that has been completely unfazed being around Big Mom, completely unfazed seeing all sorts of top-tier characters, and he's never made a comment like this where he's just observed a character's Haki and just been shocked by how intimidating it is. So the Gorosei are being gassed up quite a bit this chapter. Particularly, it's being made clear that these characters are Haki monsters as well as Devil Fruit beasts. We still don't know exactly if they are actually Devil Fruit users or if they are genuinely demons of some sort, but at the very least, they've got the full combo where they've got some seemingly demon-specific or Devil Fruit-specific abilities like Venus Juro's Ice, Saturn's Eye Magic, or Explosive Blasts. And then, of course, crazy Haki on top of that, as Warcury demonstrated this chapter, as Jinbei implied this chapter. So the Gorosei, from everything that things are shaping out to be, they are probably at least as strong as Admirals, if not higher. It's entirely possible that we're supposed to view them as comparable to monsters like Kaido and Big Mom. It's still maybe a little too early to tell, because the reality is that characters are clearly able to fight back. So Dory and Brogy, they're doing a pretty damn good job so far. They decapitated Jupiter, and then they were able to together hold off Warcury and actually knock him back, which is pretty impressive. I still don't know how strong we're supposed to view Dory and Brogy as, so I have difficulty really understanding what Oda's trying to imply here, how big of a threat we're supposed to view the Gorosei, but it seems as though the two of them together are able to stand strong even against a Gorosei like Warcury. The problem, of course, is that nothing that any character does to the Gorosei seems to have any effect whatsoever. It's similar to the problem that was going on towards the beginning of this arc against the Seraphim, where characters can clearly land hits on them, but they don't seem to have any effect. And at least with the Seraphim, a lot of readers were able to speculate that, hey, maybe Conqueror's Haki, Advanced Conqueror's Haki is the weakness, and we just haven't seen characters use Advanced Conqueror's Haki on the Seraphim just yet. We were kind of able to assume that, but with the Gorosei, it seems totally different in the sense that you can damage them, they just recover. So is there a weakness whatsoever? Conqueror, like, can even Advanced Conqueror's Haki do that? Even if we were to compare to a regeneration-based character like Marco, what we've seen is that strong enough Conqueror's Haki can actually hurt Marco despite his regeneration. Because we saw with Garp, for example, at Marineford, in the entirety of Marineford, the only character that was able to land a clean blow on Marco that left clear, permanent, visible damage was Garp, and we can assume that that was because Garp's Conqueror's Haki, or general Haki, was strong enough to do so. But with the Gorosei, it feels a little different. It feels as though it doesn't matter how strong of an attack they get hit with, they may just straight up be immortal. And not Luffy, not the Giants, no one really knows the correct solution to this situation. So I think the Gorosei are pretty much the perfect problem for the Strats to be facing right now. They're extremely high-level threats, and there's just no clear way to deal with them at the moment. It feels like we've gone back in time to trying to deal with Logia again. Pre-time skip, of course. And I'm just absolutely loving the way that the Gorosei have been portrayed so far as just absolutely terrifying monsters. Because the panel, my favorite little bit of this chapter was actually the panels of Lucci talking to Mars, because up till now, Lucci has been kind of a significant obstacle for the Straw Hats from, all the way back in Enies Lobby through towards the modern day. He's still a tough opponent. It takes some effort to take him down. He's meant to be somewhat of a challenge, right? To just see him and the framing of him looking up in what seems like fear, terror, up at this gigantic demonic bird talking down to him, evaluating his performance, making sure that he did his job, and he seems to be completely at the mercy of Mars. It really puts things into perspective. That, of course, on top of Jinbei's own reactions to Mars. So the Gorosei really have an extraordinary aura, and Oda's really sticking to that through these last several chapters. Now, that's not to say that the Strats don't get something back of their own, because Luffy kind of breaks even the menacing aura of the Gorosei by turning things into a joke, and this is one of my favorite gags that Luffy has pulled out with Gear 5th. One of the things that I like the most about it, I'm talking of course about the moment that Luffy creates a baseball bat out of a tree, and even pulls out a paintbrush out of thin air to paint it and everything like that. One of the reasons I love this gag so much is that it uses cartoon logic with the way that time works, because logically speaking, it should take Luffy some time to take this tree, whittle away at it, turn it into a bat, give it a fresh coat of paint and everything like that, but he does it all mid-attack, and it's as though, you've seen it in cartoons before, right? This sort of like, something's happening, like maybe something's being thrown or something like that, and then something's being thrown by character A, character B's over on the, we pan over to character B throws together some shenanigans or something and is able to construct something that allows them to bounce something back at character A, and you're like, well, logically, the projectile should have hit you by that point in time, but we're in Toonverse, we're following Toon logic rules, so it's like, for the sake of the joke, character B is just gonna have enough time to do whatever they need to do to create their defense that will repel the projectile back at character A. So I feel like that's the same thing that we're getting right here with Luffy, because Luffy should have gotten hit. There was not enough time for him to do all of that stuff, but just because of the way Gear 5th works, yes, there was enough time. I do wonder, maybe I'm getting too serious in the nitty-gritty of like how this works into his like combat abilities, and maybe I'm trying to scale it too much, but I'm like, maybe that's like, maybe Gear 5th just really is capable of doing things that at a speed that shouldn't logically make sense, which is why Luffy was earlier able to so easily capture Admiral Kizaru, even when Kizaru was traveling at the speed of light. But I still think that we have not gotten to see the full extent of, how the Strats match up against the Gorosei, because even though everyone is trying to escape right now, we know that the final challenge is going to be making sure that Vegapunk's message goes off at the end of 6 minutes. So maybe the Strats will get some news or some realization that, wait, they should stop and stay on this island and try to keep fighting to protect Vegapunk's legacy, because otherwise it's just going to be an escape situation. And I'm really curious, because if it's an escape situation, the Gorosei can kind of just leave the Straw Hats alone even, and just keep focusing on the Labo phase, unless maybe that's all Mars's responsibility right now, and the rest of the Gorosei are going to keep going after the Straw Hats. It depends how Oda wants to spin it, but I like to believe that the Strats are going to have to stand firm to some degree and try and hold the Gorosei off to some level. I did mention Kizaru earlier, and we did get to cut to him, and Kizaru, forget scaling or whatever, or like Kizaru's performance or whatever you want to think of it. I think it is very clear from this chapter that at least right now, Kizaru is to some degree, he's in mourning for what he had to do to his friend Vegapunk. He is regretting that, and he's using the heat of battle and the things he experienced in battle as kind of excuse, like, yeah, I'm down for the count, just leave me alone for right now. It's a perfectly valid excuse. He just had to fight a Yonko, so he's not going to really get in trouble for doing this, most likely. I don't know. I think Kizaru's going through it, and I'm very excited for that, because it suggests that there could be a turnaround for Kizaru by the end of this arc, and we could see him make some sort of a redemption or some sort of sacrifice or something like that. Maybe at the moment that it's time for Vegapunk's message to go off, maybe they need one more clutch player to come in, or perhaps Kizaru hears Vegapunk's message once it's going off, and whatever he hears there is enough motivation for him to do something against the Gorosei. So I have high hopes for Kizaru, but we're going to wait on that for the future. I'm sure people also want to talk about Zoro versus Lucci. I don't really have a lot to say there. I think that I'm looking forward to Zoro moving on to bigger and better things. At the end of the day, I don't think the fight was easy for Zoro. I think Lucci still looks good, staying standing, showing that powerful will, trying to keep going even though he's clearly past a point where he can fight effectively. Zoro did effectively win the fight. I feel like that's important to continue showing Lucci in a good light, just because, you know, we go back to Enies Lobby and that's really what Lucci was. He was the original Iron Man, you know, before Kaido, before like Doflamingo. Lucci was the character that traded blows with Luffy for chapters upon chapters upon chapters and just would not go down for the longest time, and, you know, just maintaining the respect that we still have for the character. I think Oda still made him look relatively good remaining standing at the end of this. Like, we got this show of will even if his body can't keep up with it. So happy with that for Lucci. Zoro, I don't have a ton to say. He took care of business at the end of the day, and that's good. I would love to see him move on and go up against a Gorosei or something like that, where we can see the full extent of what he can do. I think Lucci was a good challenge for him at the end of the day. How easy, how difficult you thought it was, that's not something that I care to really delve into right here. We're done with it. Let's move on. Hopefully there's still some highlights for Zoro and Sanji and stuff left, and hopefully for the rest of the Straw Hats before the end of this arc. Finally, we get to the Ancient Robot. We all knew this was coming. And he, similar to Zunisha, I'm saying it's a he, maybe it's a she. The Ancient Robot is stirred by memories of Joy Boy, much like Zunisha. So we're seeing a common thread here. I'm going to save my thoughts for that for the future, likely in a video, because there is a lot to break down in terms of these remnants of the past that we're kind of seeing, who all seem to have a sort of connection to Joy Boy, who all seem to take these sort of gigantic forms for whatever reason right now. And finally, I have some comments from the Voice of the People, my top tier of patrons. So Braxton Hart says, hoping the Straw Hats take up a less passive role in their escape after the break. Dorian Brogy getting more fight panels against the Gorosei than Sanji and Zoro is dirty work. Alright, so I definitely agree that I would... It's funny the way you put it, which is... Okay, so I definitely agree. I think it's funny the way you put it that Dory and Brogy are getting more highlight action panels this arc than Zoro and Sanji, let alone the rest of the Straw Hats, of course. I like to believe that we still have time for Zoro and Sanji to get involved, and maybe the Straw Hats' objective shifts a little bit as they realize perhaps that they should try and stay and hold the Gorosei off to some degree to help Vegapunk's message. At the same time, the Gorosei themselves aren't stopping, and there's nothing that the Straw Hats can really do to stop them, so I do believe the conflict is going to continue to play out. It does feel like the Vice Admirals are going to be a problem. Maybe we get to see some of the Straw Hats versus Vice Admirals, the lower level ones at the very least. I have difficulty imagining, like, Usopp doing anything against Mars, for example, but definitely Vice Admiral action. I think the Straw Hats can get in on that. So I think we're still just at the beginning of the battle. I believe we've got a good amount to go. I think the fact that Zoro just wrapped up Lucci, the Straw Hats are just learning the Gorosei's abilities. I think we're just getting into the swing of things. So I think there's going to be a lot more action to go around. I'm still got my fingers crossed for Zoro, Sanji, and the rest of the Straw Hats getting some time to shine. And Justin Holland said, maybe this is confirmation that other theories for Luffy's awakening can still come true, and that's why Oda made Gear 5th's only limit Luffy's imagination. So I don't know about that. I think that with this being... okay, if you're saying that Luffy could get other awakenings, I think I disagree. But if you're saying that other concepts of awakenings could be worked into what Luffy's current awakening is, which is the power of his imagination, then I would agree with that, because some people imagine, like, well, what about this form, like early Gear 5th speculation, like, what about this form where, like, Luffy's, like, super fast and super strong and is, like, combining Gear 4th Snake Man elements with, like, Gear 4th Bound Man elements and things like that. Like, I think that we can see a lot of versatility to what Luffy can do down the line. Like, maybe he does change his shape in certain ways. We've already seen him in giant form. We've already seen You know, he can transform the surrounding into rubber. He's done stuff like that before. So I do think a lot of early theories about Luffy's awakening can be worked into what his awakening is right now, because the possibilities are just so vast, and there doesn't seem to be a hard cap on what those could be. So yeah, beyond that, we don't have a One Piece chapter for a little bit, but don't worry, we've got a ton of really good videos that I've been itching to put out that I can put out during this extended break. And with that, I will talk to you all later.